So let's talk now about, still talking about a client, still talking about hiring the firm and becoming a client. What happens when our agency agreement expires? What happens when it's over? You'll remember, and we'll be reminded of this when we look at our agency agreements, that our agency agreements are for a specific period of time. We have an expiration date in these things. Let's say, for example, our agency agreement is over on April 2nd. That means tonight at 11:59 p.m., we are done. Can we agree to extend it? Of course we can. But if we don't agree to extend it, well, we're done tonight, we're done. So typically when they're over, either when they expire or we get to closing, we get to the finish line, our duties generally end when our agency ends. If you have some kind of promise to perform, you need to honor that promise. If you tell your, buyer, you're going to drop this off after settlement, for example, anytime you tell people anything, you need to make sure you honor your commitment, honor what you told them. Typically, though, when they're over, they're over. I think another good example of this, of when it may not generally end, if the listing firm is holding the earnest money deposit and we terminate, we don't go to closing, we terminate, the listing firm has the earnest money deposit and the earnest money is in dispute. We can't release the earnest money until the parties agree what's going to happen with that earnest money deposit. So that may be another example of when agency needs to continue because we still have that earnest money in our accounts. As we said, exceptions can be a promise or implied obligation. If you tell somebody you're going to do something, please do it. Even if you're telling them you're going to do it after settlement. No broken promises. And Abigail, if I could get you to rename yourself. Thank you. Another exception, a pending transaction. If your agency agreement expires when you're under contract, you still owe the duty to get to closing. Now, here's a best practice. There's no law and rule about this. This is just Julie talking. Best practice says get an extension. If agency agreement ends in the middle of your contract period, get it extended at least to the day of closing. So that way there's no question about who owes what each other duty. May that be a few more weeks or a few more days. Questions on that, comments? I'm a big one for a paper trail, not just an assumption. Boy, I hate the word assume. That can get us into trouble pretty quickly. So just get it extended, get you through closing. What if after your agency agreement is over, you decide you want to buy the property? Even though our agency agreement is over, I still can't get involved in self-dealing. I no longer represent the seller. That agreement expired. Yesterday, the seller was my client. Today, they're just a consumer again. Does that mean I can use the tools and the knowledge that I gained yesterday when we had an agreement to use to my benefit? No. So even, self-dealing, the biggest conflict of interest, dealing on my own behalf. Again, if I decide after the listing expires that I want to purchase the property, I would get my BIC involved, proceed with caution. I don't want to use what I know about the seller against them. And I think it's really important that we understand, just because our agency agreement is over does not give me the right to run down the road blabbing their confidential information, right? Duty of confidentiality may be expected to continue until I bring a new client in the transaction. Let's say, for example, I'm the listing agent. Our listing agreement expires. The seller signs with a new firm. Everybody with me? I had the listing. I couldn't sell it. It expired. They hired a new firm. They have it listed with a new firm. I now pick up a buyer client that's interested in that property. Who do I owe my loyalty to today? The buyer.
Buyer client.
The buyer. That's exactly right. So even though, you know, again, this duty of confidentiality is going to be expected to continue. Please understand, once we expire, I don't have a golden ticket to run around and blab their confidential information, right? They still have to trust, but that changes when I bring another client to the transaction. Does that make sense to you guys? We always owe old car and that loyalty to the current client. And if you don't know who you owe that old car to, you got to look towards the agreement of the firm. You got to look towards the arrangement, the relationship with who is the firm in a relationship with. What questions do I have about that?
Julie, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So you had, like you were talking about having, you know, a buyer for that house that you had listed with, you still owe confidentiality to that seller, correct? Like you can't use anything that you know to help your buyer, even though you owe them loyalty to the buyer,
Absolutely
right?
not. Who is my client today?
The buyer.
The buyer. Who do I owe old car to today?
The buyer.
The buyer.
Yeah, but you won't be able to give any.
Yeah, but nope.
Okay.
My duty of confidentiality remains unless I bring a new client, right? So I'm not going to blab about the seller unless I have a client. So let's say, for example, my sellers had to sell because they're going through a divorce. Well, I went through the entire listing agreement with keeping that secret to myself, right? Just because we expire, it's not like I'm going to go out there and say, hey guys, 123 Main Street's going through a divorce, bring your, right? I'm not going to run out and blab their information. But when a buyer calls me and says, I want representation and I want to purchase 123 Main Street, now who is my client? The buyer. It might be one of those things, if you're not comfortable with that, maybe you want to refer that to another agent in your office that doesn't know the sellers have to sell. You know what I'm saying? That may be I know I'm bumping on some moral compasses right now. You make that decision, but you may be best to refer that buyer to another agent in your office that doesn't know that, but you owe old car to the current client. Does that make sense? I know that's kind of a hard pill. You may look at him and say, look, you know, I'm just not comfortable with this. And that's, hey, I get that. I would have a hard time there myself. Okay. So clients get old car, current clients get old car. Questions on that?
So in that instance, if I've really worked hard for my for the seller, it just didn't sell. Contract ran out. I mean, would it hurt to say, listen, let's re-up, and here's the reason why. Okay.
Sure.
I know information about you. If, you know, just give me some more time, because I don't want to find myself in a situation where if I go get a buyer, I know things about you and my obligation, my loyalty is to them. Exactly. So I can use that to leverage.
Absolutely.
Continue. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Either they're going to say, plumber, I'm tired of you. You tried it for 5 months and it didn't work out. Or they're going to say, gee, that's a good point you make. Where do I sign? Right. Okay. Maybe you don't want to continue your relationship with them. Maybe they were, maybe you brought them 5 offers that they declined all of them. So what do you think the 6th one's going to do? Right. It's a two-way street sometimes. So yeah, absolutely. If you're thinking about extending, you can throw that out there. I mean, how often does this happen? I don't know. I mean, how many buyers and sellers are in the market right now? You know, there's a chance that you could pick a buyer up tomorrow that's interested. How big of a chance? I can't answer that, you know, but there is a chance. And I think, Plumber, to your point, that could be a good tool for you to use to help extend that agency agreement. We can always agree to an extension. Okay. So we've been on and on and on about clients. What do we owe customers? First off, let's be clear. Let's talk about what customers don't get. Customers don't get old car. They don't get confidentiality. They don't get loyalty and obedience. They don't get reasonable skill, care, and diligence. Does this give me the right to lie to my customers? Can I be dishonest? Can I be not fair? I love all your head shaking. No, thank you. That makes me feel good. So what duties do I owe my customers? They get honesty and fairness and disclosure of material facts. I don't care who you are. If you're my client or my customer, I always have a duty to disclose material facts. The difference might be, you know, with my customer, I might say, look, there's a water stain on the ceiling. I disclosed it, right? I'm not a plumber. I'm not a roofer. I can't tell you how that water stain got there, where it came from. All I can do is point stuff out, right? Look, water stain. The customer, I'm going to point it out. The client, I'm going to say, look, there's a water stain. I think you should contact a plumber or a roofer or whatever's above us to look into it further, right? They get that further extra step. There's a difference in disclosing material facts and then explaining. Be careful not to act like a plumber or a roofer, unless you are. I can't say clearly that water stain came from all the rain we had last week. Everybody good with that? Careful, you know when to stop talking. I think that's what gets us into the most trouble, is we don't know when to stop talking. We think we're helping. I think sometimes less is best. Duties to principals and third persons. Again, a broker's duties when dealing with parties to a transaction apply, regardless of the broker's agency relationship to such parties. So whether the client, whether this person, the consumer, I should say, is a client or a customer, let's look together in your books, page 163. And let's talk about some of these additional duties. Page 163. We're going to talk about willful misrepresentation, negligent misrepresentation. We're going to talk more about that first bullet point in just a second, so hang on to that. To either party, principal or customer, I have a duty to avoid making false promises. Again, if you're going to promise a party to do something, do it. If you're going to say, you know, let me look into that and get back to you. If you tell them that, then you better look into it and get back to them. If you have no intentions to do that, they say, I don't know. Be honest with them. We owe both principals and customers, clients and customers, a duty to avoid undisclosed conflict of interest. Again, mostly this relies with our clients, talking about undisclosed dual agency. We need to properly account for monies, other people's monies. I'll tell you, that's, if I were to make a pie chart of the biggest disciplinary actions, I'm going to say violation of trust accounts and mishandling of other people's monies. If you want to get yourself in trouble real fast with the real estate commission, mistreat somebody else's money. Remember, their main purpose is to protect the public, and that does include their monies. We have a duty to act competently. Again, we're the professionals in this transaction. We need to act worthy. We need to act competently. We need to avoid improper conduct. We need to be honest in all of our dealings with our parties. When working with sellers, we have a duty to deliver all offers. We deliver all offers. Can I tell somebody this isn't a good offer without discussing it with my seller first? No, I deliver all offers. I'm not the one selling this house, am I? So I have a duty to present all offers. And then we need to disclose any additional commissions, referral fees, kickbacks. Of course, this is assuming RESPA doesn't apply. Everybody gets that. Everybody gets these duties. That's license law and commission rule. As mentioned earlier, we also have a duty to avoid any willful or negligent misrepresentation or omission of a material fact. So we're getting ready to talk about what I refer to as the big four. If you mistreat a material fact, the consequences of your actions are going to result in one of the big four, as deemed by the Real Estate Commission. And before we define the big four, before we get into the big four, let me go off book for just a second. We're going to back up and go back to the basics. Is it helpful to go back to the basics sometimes? So we're going to go back to the basics, and we're just going to start with defining some words, and then we're going to do a mashup. So let's just define some words, make sure we understand what they mean. A misrepresentation is a lie. Somehow you got false information about a material fact out there. Maybe you verbally spoke it, maybe it was email, maybe it was text, maybe it was in your MLS advertising. A misrepresentation is a lie. You opened your mouth and a lie fell out. If you omit something, then it means you did the opposite, right? You kept your mouth shut. You didn't disclose the material facts. Misrepresentation and omission is what I really want you guys to focus on. There's two ways we can improperly handle material facts. You either open your mouth and let a lie fall out, or you keep your mouth shut. When a complaint about a material fact goes down to the Real Estate Commission, they're going to take it a step further, and they're going to ask themselves if it was done willfully. Was it done on purpose? Was it done intentionally? Or was it done negligently? It's an accident. It still happened though, right? You didn't mean for it to. But the fact is, it still happened. You either got the wrong information out there or you didn't get the information out there. Real quick, before we go any further, there's a very fine line. Let's make sure we are clear of the fine line. Puffing is not a misrepresentation. Misrepresentation is a lie. Puffing is an exaggeration of your opinion. I can say best house on the block. That's my opinion. Be very, very careful that your puffing doesn't turn into an incorrect statement. Instead of saying best house on the block, what have I said? The only house on the block. Assuming there are other houses on the block, that's no longer puffing. I've now misrepresented that block. Sometimes when we're writing our public remarks, we like to use lots of adjectives to help paint a picture. Be so careful that your adjectives aren't painting a wrong picture. With puffing, you are, well, not necessarily puffing. Any terms we're representing. Anything you represent, make sure you make with regard whether or not it's the truth or not. Don't say something just for the sake of saying it. Look it up, research it before you advertise it. The Real Estate Commission is we're going to talk a little bit more about the reasonable standard test the real estate commission is going to apply the reasonable standard test? Would a similar agent in a similar situation, how would they have acted? One thing that we cannot do, or we should not do, is put disclaimers in MLS to try to come to our defense. Have you guys ever seen, for example, like buyer to verify schools? If you advertise the wrong school district, you're not going to get out of trouble by saying buyer to verify schools. If you advertise a school district, you have a duty to make sure that that is the correct school district. And that disclaimer is not going to keep you out of trouble. And then the commission will look at different standards for listing agents versus selling agents. Technically, selling agents should be able to rely on the information that's in MLS unless they have a flag go up. If you have a flag go up, then you need to investigate. You need to ask some questions. If your buyer says, I know the MLS says this, but is it accurate? We need to investigate and help them get that answer. For the most part, we should be able to rely what is on MLS. But we always, especially as selling agents, we always need to be on the look for those red flags. I think where this comes up the most is square footage. I have zero dimension ability. Like I cannot look at a space and tell you a couch will fit there. I just don't have that. I can't do that. And I can't walk into a room and say, oh, this is 450 square feet. I cannot do that. But if this room is advertised as, let's just pretend that this room is 450 square feet. And let's say it's advertised as like 900. I should be able to walk in here and have a flag go up and say, are you sure this is 900? You guys with me? Now, if it's 450 and it's advertised as 455, my flag's not going up. What's 5 square feet? But if it's that far off that you have a flag, go out to your car, get your measurer and measure that room yourself. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe the agent didn't measure. But I think mostly we should be able to rely on MLS unless we have a reason not to, unless we have questions, those little red flags. So we defined misrepresentation, we defined omission, we defined willful, and we defined negligent. So what we're going to do now, starting on page 166, is a mashup. And we're going to talk about what I refer to as the big four when it comes to mishandling material facts. And the first one we have is willful misrepresentation. It's a lie. You know it's a lie. You know darn well it's a lie. You have actual knowledge and you still lie. Let's go back to that leaky roof. You know the roof leaks. I don't care how you learned that information. Maybe the seller told you. Maybe you happened to be there on Wednesday when we got, what, 1.5 inches of rain in one morning, and you happened to notice the ceiling dripping and you saw it with your own eyes. It doesn't matter how you know, but somehow you learned that the roof leaks. A potential buyer comes in and says, did the roof leak? And you say, you just committed willful misrepresentation. You know, and you lied. Negligent misrepresentation is still a lie, but you didn't mean for it to be. You didn't know. You answered without regard to the truth. Maybe you don't know that the roof leaks. You weren't there on Wednesday when we got 1.5 inches in a matter of a couple hours. Somebody says, does the roof leak? And instead of saying, I don't know, let me get back to you, you say, you still lied. You didn't mean to, but you still lied. when it comes to negligent acts, this is where the Real Estate Commission is going to use the reasonable standards test. Negligent acts, they're going to ask what a prudent broker should have reasonably known. Before I answered the question about the roof, could I ask the seller, could I look back at the RPOs and see how they complete it? Now, if it's not rained in weeks and the seller looks at me as dead in the eye and says, no, this roof doesn't leak, the reasonable standard test is going to determine that if it's dry and the seller lies, how could I know? All I can do is prove that I took the steps to try to find out. I asked the questions. I told them to complete the RPOs honestly. I can only do so much, and I can prove what I tried to do. Everybody with me? Don't tell the commission you didn't investigate, you didn't ask questions, you didn't look into it. Because they're going to ask what a reasonable broker in this same situation, a prudent broker, should they reasonably have known? Could they have found out? As we said earlier, the Real Estate Commission doesn't see disclaimers as a defense. I think the biggest disclaimer I see is about the schools, fire to verify schools. If you're going to advertise schools, and Kiana, this may be something that's different in Raleigh versus here, but in the Triad MLS, schools are not a required field. So if I want to put them in, I can, but I don't have to. It's not a required field. If I do disclose the schools, I can't follow it up with a buyer to verify in order to protect myself. Again, that reasonable standard acts. Could the agent have found out? Can I go to the school board's website and pull up the school map and look and see what schools this home is located in? Yes. Are you going to document that you did it? Are you going to download that web page and put it in your file? Everybody shake your head yes. Because what do we document? Every single thing. Are y'all tired of that yet? Sorry, you got 3.5 more classes of me telling you to document everything. I'm drilling it in your head. I can't tell you how many agents have gotten themselves out of trouble because they had documentation. Had they not, I don't know what the outcome would have been. Listing agents, we're responsible for the accuracy of the information in MLS. Even if you have somebody putting listings in for you, let's say you have an assistant, or you have your firm has an admin that puts listing in for you. The responsibility is not on the data entry. The responsibility is on the listing agent. So as the listing agent, if you pay somebody to put listings in for you, you need to check it. You need to review it before they hit submit. That's what I did on lunch today. I put a listing in. It wasn't mine. I actually got the proof out for approval right now to the listing agent to look at before I activate it. It's not on me. They're not going to call me, are they? They're going to call the listing agent. As we said earlier, selling agents should be able to rely on the information in MLS unless you have that red flag goes up. Guys, we always need to, it's like that little voice in the back of your head. You know, are you sure the oven's working? It's hanging on by a hinge. That should be a red flag. Are you sure the roof doesn't leak? I see a water stain right there. We need to always be looking for red flags. We can't walk around with rose-colored glasses not seeing this stuff. We have to look out for this stuff and know when to ask questions. So our misrepresentations are a lie. Either you do it on purpose or you do it on accident, but you somehow still got the wrong information out there. If you learn that you make a mistake, correct it. As soon as you learn you make a mistake, correct it. And if you have any interested buyers, make sure you reach out to them or their agent and let them know. We're all humans. We all make mistakes. And that does include our commissioners, by the way. They're humans as well. I've met a good chunk of them back in the day when we were allowed to shake hands. I've shook some of their hands. They're people too. If you make a mistake, get it corrected and notify any interested parties. Make sure they get the correct information. Questions on misrepresentation. We're going to talk about omission next. Willful omission, again, the broker has actual knowledge. Those are some key words with willful acts. You know. Willful omission says you have actual knowledge, but you don't disclose. When it comes to omission, the idea of they didn't ask, so I'm not going to tell, doesn't apply. If you know the roof leaks, but you don't share that because they didn't specifically ask about the roof, it's an omission. You know about a material fact and you omitted it. You don't have to wait for the buyer to say, by the way, does the roof leak? If you know the roof leaks, you have a duty to disclose it. I think listing agents especially, I think this is the one that gets us in trouble the most, because we want to do right by our sellers. We want to help our sellers sell. We want to honor their requests. The seller doesn't want to disclose that the roof leaks. Guess what? The seller doesn't have to. I'm going to say material facts, something like the roof leaking, that and commission is the number one argument between sellers and listing agents, the number one disagreement. But we need to understand our affirmative duty to license law and commission rule. My licensing board says what? I've got to disclose, even though the seller doesn't want me to. If the seller really doesn't want to know, buyers to know that the roof leaks, then they need to go for sale by owner. Because if they're hiring an agent, and this very well might be why some sellers go for sale by owner, that and commission, right? The things that I think are the two biggest disagreements between seller and listing. Very well be why they choose to go for sale by owner. Buyers beware, no matter how the seller is listing the property, whether they're represented or not. So willful omission, you have actual knowledge and you do not disclose, versus negligent omission, unintentional failure to discover and disclose. You don't have the knowledge. The real estate commission is going to ask, could you have found out? Could you have researched it? Could you have gone to NCDOT's highway and see if there's a proposed road widening project? Can you go to GIS and see the current zoning? That's what the real estate commission is going to find out. Could you have found out? Again, with negligent acts, they look at that reasonable standards test. Questions about omission? I think in practice, the biggest focus for us is not to misrepresent and not to omit. Again, when it gets down to the commission, they'll be the ones to decide if it was done willfully or negligently. But as long as we are upfront, as long as we disclose, as long as we don't lie, we're going to be in good shape with material facts. And as I mentioned earlier, guys, misrepresentation and omission are like the second biggest complaints that the real estate commission got last year. We are improperly handling material facts. Yeah, Plummer?
No, I was just gonna say, I like how you said for misrepresentation, you open your mouth and the lie fell out. That's gonna stick in my head.
It's good. Good.
Just fell out.
It just fell out, you know? Good. Again, when we get into this next section, we're going to spend some time talking about the R codes. So we'll be able to talk about this stuff again. I think it's important that we know that I don't care how the seller completes the R codes. Even if they say no representation or no, I always have a duty to discover. Is everybody clear on that? Is there ever an occasion where I don't disclose a material fact? And I'm so happy to see you guys shaking your head no. There's never an excuse for me as a licensee to disclose a material fact. We have something out there as well called the Unfair and Deceptive Trade Practices, Unfair and Deceptive Practices Act. This applies to the consumer that doesn't regularly sell real estate. So let's think about the for sale by owner. This isn't an investor that does this for a living. This applies to brokers. Some owners are the ones that sell it for a living. The for sale by owner, for example, may be exempt under the Unfair and Deceptive Practices Act, Trade Practices Act. If the broker or the owner, the investor owner, for example, is found guilty, it could make the sales contract null and void. I'm not the one that can make it null and void. This would have to go stand in front of a judge. This is one reason why we say we're never allowed to lie. Nobody, I don't care who you are, agent, seller, buyer, none of us can lie. They take the fun out of it, don't they? I can't lie. I can't act unworthy. Unfair and deceptive practices includes giving a misleading opinion or some kind of false statement. I think that's just a really nice way of saying lying. It could also include an omission. Remember what we said to watch your advertising. I'm all about colorful advertising. Use adjectives, use words to describe. Tried MLS recently upped the character limits. I think we're up to what, 1,000 characters now in our public remarks. At one point it was like 550. So they gave us a lot more room to say a lot more stuff, which is great as long as we're not abusing it and we're not crossing that line into a misrepresentation. What, social media? Guys, is social media a form of advertising? If you're putting something out there on your Facebook about your new listing, you're advertising it, right? Social media is included. Any form of advertising needs to be accurate, it needs to be true. Anybody, the investor, owner, or the broker found guilty of the Deceptive and Fair and Deceptive Trade Practices Act could be entitled to the damages ×3. Remember what we said earlier, the real estate commission can't fine me, but the injured party can hire an attorney and sue me. And that's where I'm looking at damages ×3. Again, the Unfair and Deceptive Trade Practices Act does not apply to the individual owner that doesn't do this on a regular basis. So the for sale by owner does not fall under this. But the person that does it on a regular basis, and you and I, could be subject to this. I just want to point out, if you want to make a note, there are a couple other places in your book that this is talked about. So you can find the Unfair and Deceptive Practices Act, also in chapter 10, and then on chapter 16. Chapter 10, we go through in 302. So we talk about it briefly there. Just be aware. Questions on that?
Julie, you said that that act, let's see, you said it includes some owners.
Uh-huh.
Okay,
So the owners that sell on a regular basis. So that's why I gave the example as an investor.
An investor. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Like the for sale by owner that sells a house once every 15 years, they're not gonna, they don't apply to this act. But the person that does this on a regular basis, and an investor is just an example. If you're in the habit of buying and selling every year for yourself, you still sell regularly enough that you may not fall under that. If you move around a lot. I hate, man, I don't know, moving sucks. When I move into a house, I plan to be here for, these people that move around every couple of years, I guess they don't have much clutter though, do they? They don't have anything to accumulate. There's pluses there. We bought this house in August of 2020, and we're not calling it our forever home. We're calling it our until we're ready for a retirement plan home. So I think I got one more move to make, but it's a little ways down the road. Unless that great condo at the beach opens up and I can get down there sooner. That would be the exception. All right, this next topic we have to talk about, we're going to go off book for a little bit, and I'll show you in just a minute where I got the information. We need to talk about some equality issues. I think we're all aware that various equality issues have been growing concerns in every industry across the entire country. And real estate absolutely has equality issue concerns. So part of what the Real Estate Commission wants to do is to help educate us. So most of the material that we're getting ready to go through, actually all the material that we're getting ready to go through, was from this year's continuing education class. I know most of you haven't had to take CE yet. You probably won't have to take it until after June. So it's important that we go through it, make sure you guys have this information. I provided this section for you guys in Learn, Test, Pass. Again, I'll show you in just a second where it is. So just know you're not going to find it in the book. So when we talk about equality issues, there's a couple different words, a couple different terms that we need to be familiar with. And disparate impact is one of those. Disparate impact is when a policy, for example, seems okay on its face, but it somehow harms a member of the protected class. Maybe it's a practice in how we hire. Maybe it's a practice in how we promote within. It may not mean to harm, but it does. If any member of the protected class is harmed unintentionally, it's still a problem. Can we agree with that? You didn't mean for it to, but it still happened and it's still a problem. And that's what we're referring to as disparate impact. Just to give you a couple examples of things that we might see disparate impact. Source of income, if the source of income, let's say you're a landlord, the source of income could be a discriminatory practice. There's a difference in no income versus where does your income come from. The source of the income can't be a reason for denial. People with disabilities and handicaps may be treated differently. Families with children, we're touching on familial status. that may be handled differently. Let's say I was a property manager and I had an apartment building that, I don't know, 12 stories tall. And the top 2 floors have balconies. Floor 11 and floor 12 has balconies. And I have a family that wants to apply to rent a unit on the 12th floor. And that family includes 5 children under the age of 8. Can I deny them occupancy because I don't think that's safe for the kids? And I see head shaking no, and you guys are right. I can't say you can't live here because you have kids and I don't want to see them fall off the balcony. If their income allows them, if they qualify, they have the right to live there. Another example, any limitation based on an individual's race or an individual's national origin. Again, it's disparate impact is an underlying issue. We're going to touch on fair housing. We'll review the protected classes, fresh corn or Fred's corn, however you learned it. So we'll review the protected classes specifically. Another term with equality that we need to discuss is something called implicit basis. This is some kind of prejudice that is present, but it's not consciously held. Maybe it's a stereotype that you grew up with. Maybe your family member, your grandmother, or your great aunt instilled something in you as a young child. You didn't realize where it came from. You just knew that's how it was. That's an implicit basis. One of the biggest things we can do to reduce our implicit basis is to create conscious awareness. Listen to that internal voice in your mind. I could throw up red flags on myself too, right? If I feel a thought going through my mind, where'd that come from? Where in the world did that come from? Was that my great grandma back when I was 5? That's an implicit basis that I can now correct. Other ways we can reduce implicit basis, education. That's part of what we're doing right now. Once you make somebody aware of something, we're help educating the public, educating the consumers, educating each other. If you hear your coworkers, stop and educate them. Being familiar with fair housing. Did you guys know April is Fair Housing Month? National Association of Realtors recognizes April as Fair Housing Month. What a great opportunity to go to NAR's website if you're a member yet. If not, go there when you do join. But what a great opportunity. They have so many tools out there to help educate us, for example. Especially this month. I'm expecting all sorts of things to roll out. There's a designation course called At Home with Diversity. You can take that class. There's I think 2020 or 2019, the National Association of Realtors launched a simulation, and it's called Fairhaven. So Fairhaven is a fictional town, and you are the agent of Fairhaven, USA. And this simulation puts you in different scenarios. You guys remember those choose your own adventure books when you were kids? That's kind of what we're doing here. So they put you in situations and you say how you would respond. And if you didn't respond according to fair housing laws, according to NARs, then they'll help educate you on that. It's really interesting. Again, if you're a member of NAR, check it out. If you're not, make yourself a note to check it out. I think it took me about an hour and a half to go through it. So you want to make sure you allot some time. Your firm will also hopefully have some kind of policy and procedure. What are we going to do as a firm to help educate and help create awareness for equality issues, racial equality? The Real Estate Commission, I'll admit I've not done this yet, but it is on my to-do list. The Real Estate Commission says there's an implicit association test. So you can go to Google and just type in implicit, I-M-P-L-I-C-I-T. Just go to Google and put in implicit association test. And you can give yourself a test. There's several out there. The Real Estate Commission doesn't recommend one over the other, but these can help evaluate your implicit basis, help increase your awareness. They can help you squash some of these maybe possibly unfavorable thoughts that you have. We mentioned NAR. Our code of ethics say we cannot discriminate against the protected classes. So we have fair housing everywhere, don't we? We have federal fair housing, state fair housing. The Real Estate Commission says we have to abide by fair housing, and the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics says so as well. So important that we're familiar with fair housing. And help implement these policies in your day-to-day business. Some firms have come up with groups to help redo the firm's policies. It's good to have, more two eyes are better, two heads are better than one. There we go. That's what I'm trying to say. So if you have several different people coming from several different places, several different walks of life, so you can get opinions from all, opinions from each. The Real Estate Commission has also taken a huge stance within the last couple of years. We're getting ready to look at their homepage. We can see their commitment to racial equality in just a second. The Real Estate Commission the application process has ended. So now they are currently selecting a DEI, Disparate Equality Administrator, something like that, position to make sure that the Real Estate Commission is acting accordingly, racial impact. They don't have disparate impact. They don't have implicit basis. So we'll look at their homepage again in just a second. So disparate impact, implicit basis, and racial equality is the other big focus. Racial equality gets interesting because, thank you, diversity, equality, and inclusion. Thank you. There's usually not one definition for racial equality. So again, what the Real Estate Commission has done is taken several different definitions. So we're going to look at a few. I think we're going to find that they all pretty much say the same thing. The Aspen Institute defines racial equality as a society in which people are no more or less likely to experience society's benefits or burdens because of the color of their skin. The Aspen Institute determines that is what racial equality is. Not more or less. And again, I'll show you guys in just a second where I got all this. The Center for Assessment and Police Development has defined racial equality as the condition that would be achieved if one's racial identity no longer predicted how one fares. The city of Durham says racial equality is the condition when racial identity cannot be used to predict individual group outcomes, and outcomes for all groups are improved. Are we kind of seeing a common theme? And then good old Merriam-Webster of Webster's Dictionary defines racial equality as equalities of freedom from bias or favoritism. We got a little bit more to say about racial equality. Again, we're going to talk more about the Real Estate Commission, their stance. We do need to go ahead and take a break. So let's take 10. We come back, we'll talk a little bit more about racial equality. So let's say I got 2:55. So let's come back at 3:06 and we'll keep going. Welcome back. Everybody doing good? Hanging in there with me? It's hard to be inside on a day like today, isn't it? It's tough. My husband's outside doing, I mean, on the one hand, my husband's out there doing yard work, so I don't have to be out there helping him. But on the other hand, he gets to be outside doing yard work. All right. As we said, the Real Estate Commission has a commitment to racial equality, and one way that they commit to racial equality, one way that they commit to racial equality is relevant commission rules. Remember, anything that starts with a 58A is a commission rule. So the commission has a rule on fair housing. Rule 1601 says that licensees are conduct by a licensee which violates provisions of state fair housing constitutes improper conduct in violation of this general statute, this license law. So to sum that up, discriminatory practices, any violation of fair housing will land you with the disciplinary board. Will have your license face disciplinary action. Again, don't need to know the rule numbers. I just have them here for reference. Let you guys know that this is for real and I'm not making this stuff up. It's the commission rules. Another commission rule requires the mandatory insertion of non-discriminatory language in all of our agency agreements. So our listing agreement, our buyer's agency agreement, and our property management agreement. We're going to see that there's verbiage in there, all caps in bold, that says we will not discriminate in this transaction based on discriminate against the protected classes. So we'll see this. We'll see this verbiage, this wording when we look at our agency agreements. There's another commission rule that prohibits discriminatory brokerage activities or promotion of a broker. Promotion should be on value, on merit, not on race, color, religion, national origin, etc. No, you don't need to know the numbers. I just put them there so you know as a reference. I'm getting to show you where you can find them all. When it comes to our advertisings, we need to make sure that our ads are not discriminatory or prejudiced. It's going to be an easier word for me to say. No discriminatory language, no prejudice language. HUD has always had it's called Part 109 Fair Housing Advertisement. And HUD offers advertising guidelines, making sure that we're not saying inappropriate. One thing, for example, that Tried MLS rolled out the first of this year, they have some kind of software now that looks for words that, if used improperly, could be seen as discriminatory. So if they pick something up in the public remarks, they're going to warn me, they're going to caution. For example, I put a listing in a couple weeks ago for one of our builders, one of our new homes communities. And the remarks were describing the white cabinets. And MLS flagged the word white. Now, they didn't say, Julie, you can't use this, but they flagged it and made me review it to make sure that I was using the word white appropriately. So they have this whole laundry list of words that come from HUD's Part 109 Fair Housing Advertising Donna had it flagged too. Again, it didn't tell me I couldn't use it. It just said, whoa, 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 whoa. Make sure you're using this word appropriately. You guys, please make sure you review your public remarks, your advertising. Have I mentioned that before? So important. Y'all know how the internet works, right? Once you put it out there, it is out there. It's really hard to get back. Kind of like that email. Once you hit send, so make sure before you hit send or before you hit submit that you're in compliance. If you're not sure, have your BIC review it. Have somebody else in your firm review it. And pay attention to the warnings from MLS. In this CE class, there was also mention of the Housing Choice Voucher Program. This is HUD assistance for housing for eligible families. You may have heard of some of this is referred to as Section 8 housing or public assistance. And there's a list of things that these Housing Choice Voucher programs, these Section 8 housings need to have. Quality standards. We'll see that in just a second. Quality standards are anything to keep the home decent, keep the home safe, and keep the home sanitary. So with our equity issues, what can we do as a broker? Well, I think one of the biggest things we can do, we can help educate the public. But what if you have a member of the public that refuses to comply with fair housing? What if you have a member of the public that refuses to comply with racial equality? And I think the best thing, I don't know about y'all, but I don't want to deal with this person. It's not worth it to me. There's no amount of money out there that's worth it for me. This is the choice you have to make. But once a broker gets involved in a transaction, fair housing kicks in. And it's not just a violation of the consumer, it's a violation on us as well. One thing I like, this multiple offer world that we're in right now, some agents, when they're presenting like 40 some offers to their seller, some agents, instead of sending them 40 offer to purchase and contracts and saying, here you go, look through it, let me know which one you want. Some agents are doing like an Excel spreadsheet. So they're saying, these are the terms of offer number 1. These are the terms of offer number 2. Here are the terms of offer number 3. So purchase price, due diligence, earnest money. Understand, we still have to present all offers. I still have to send the actual offer to my seller. But one thing that the Excel spreadsheet does is it forces the seller to look at the important things of the contract, such as how much is the buyer offering. And what they're not seeing, unless they investigate on their own, are the names of the buyer. Because sometimes we think we look at a name and we can draw conclusions on an individual. Hopefully the sellers are making choices, and we're encouraging our sellers to make choices, not on the individual buyer, but whether or not they're qualified. Can they buy the house? Do they have that backing from the lender? And I think that's one thing the Excel sheet does, is it takes the person out of it and it just focuses on the facts of the offer. So what we're going to do now, we're going to go check out the Real Estate Commission's website real quick. So we go to ncrec.gov. And on the home page of the website, I don't have to go anywhere. On the home page of the website, if we scroll down just a little bit, we have the North Carolina Real Estate Commission commitment to racial equality. So they put this information out. I don't know, you guys can make a note to come check this out, because as you can see, it's lengthy. But they put their statement on the home page. Consumers are hopefully coming here for information. So I think it's important that consumers see that the real estate commission is holding us by holding themselves responsible for commitment to racial equality. So you guys make a note to look at that on the homepage. The other thing I want to point out on the commission's website, we've talked about making sure you're familiar with the current law and the current rule. Right here on the homepage, smack dab on the homepage, license, law, and rule. And when you click on that, it takes you to the license law, chapter 93A, and it gives you the different sections. The reason I'm pointing this out to you is because this is a good resource. If you're not sure what the current law is or the current rule is, go to the commission's homepage. And then there's also rules. So again, everything for chapter 58 is commission rule. And once it loads, the various rules. So use the real estate commission. We're going to see a couple other things on the commission's page, but it's a great resource. They're not only educating me and you, they're also helping to educate the public. Now that you guys are licensed, while I'm here, do you guys know you have a login to the real estate commission? So again, on the home page, licensee login. Anytime you finish a post licensing, anytime you finish a CE class, give it about a week when it's over, and then you need to go to your licensee login just to make sure it's posted. There's several hands that have to touch it. The director has to process it and send it to the real estate commission for them to process. Just in case it gets missed, I'd rather you guys check it out after you do CE than find out your license is inactive because the credit didn't post. So give it about a week. Give everybody time. Give it about a week, but just get in that habit. Post licensing and CE, just go into your licensee log on. And if you've never been here before, that's okay. It's your license number and your password is the last 4 digits of your social security number. So you don't even have to create an account. And I'm right here on the homepage, no tab to click on. You go to ncrec.gov, scroll down, and boom, there's your licensee login. There's some proposed rules changes. If they go into effect, they'll take effect on July 1st. Some of our forms, I think some of our forms are going to change on July 1st. Just be aware that that's coming. Forms change. They just do. So your firm will help you make sure you get the current, but if you're curious about what those proposed rules are, again, you have all this information here on the homepage. Are you guys getting
not to go backwards, but just a really quick question. The worksheet or the spreadsheet that you were speaking of, you know, with all the offers, is there a template in which you would, you know, where we could find something, or would it just be based on maybe like the fill in the blank, you know,
That's
parts
exactly what are the important terms. Yep. So
okay.
Purchase price, due diligence, earnest money, closing date. Is the buyer asking for any seller pay closing costs? Are they getting a loan? Are they a cash buyer? You know, so just some of the things that you want to pull out to help discuss with your seller.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. And there is no template. Your firm may have something, but it might just be, you know, just the individual agent's preference as well.
Okay.
And again, if you're doing the Excel sheet with the terms, everybody good, you still have to send the actual offers. You still have to send all 40 some offers to your seller. The only reason you're using the Excel sheet is to help make that easier. I mean, guys, our offer to purchase and contract is 15 pages. So if you get 40 offers, you're sending your seller 600 pieces of paper saying, sort through this and let me know if you have any questions. Do they have questions? Yeah, I bet they do. Like, what does this mean? Stuff like that. So if you just, and Magdalene, that's just kind of, you know, whatever you plan on discussing. And that way you have a nice side-by-side comparison.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sure. The other thing I want to point out real quick, if we go to Learn, Test, Pass, there's a folder at the very bottom of Learn, Test, Pass called Campbell, and that's stuff just for us. And I very well may put something else in this before it's over, but this is for us. And within the Campbell folder, it's an invalid or correct PDF. Okay, so I will make a note. Within the Campbell folder should be this year's CE topic on racial equality. And what I have done, once I can get it in here, I'll check it out on break. I don't know why it's not working. What I did, once we can see this, is I went through that and highlighted the things that we just talked about. So disparate impact, implicit basis, racial equality, and the housing voucher program, housing choice voucher program. So that's where I got this information. I don't know why it's not coming up. So I'll check that out on break and see if I can't get that working. Questions? Maybe. If we're talking about it, it's a good candidate. So I gave you everything, right? I gave it to you. It's in the syllabus as well. And that we know comes up, right? But I just wanted to, I like to source my work. I like to show you where I get my information. So within the syllabus, right about right in here somewhere is going to be the equality issues.
Page 10.
Racial issues. You see it? Yeah. So it's here somewhere. Oh. So the syllabus refers you to the Gen Up. So I will definitely look on break and make sure I have that available to you guys. I've seen it. I promise you I have. And if I can't get it on Learn, Test, Pass, I'll email it to you. One way or another, I'm going to get you guys that PDF.
It's on the syllabus on page 10.
Okay, so I may not have the most current in here. So it's good. It's on the syllabus. Perfect. Which, by the way, where's the current syllabus? ncrec.gov. If you go to education, there's post-licensing education. There are your syllabi for the 3 post-licensing classes. All sorts of good information on the Real Estate Commission's website. All right, so getting back into our book, chapter 8, we're on page 176. We need to talk about the doctrine of caveat emptor. Who remembers what caveat emptor means? It's your Latin lesson for the day.
Buyer beware.
Yeah, caveat emptor. Let the buyer beware. We need to understand North Carolina is a caveat emptor state. What does the seller have to disclose? Nothing. The only exception to this rule is lead-based paint. If the seller is aware of lead in their home, if they have records or reports, they have to disclose that. And we will talk about lead-based paint when we talk about working with sellers. We'll see that tomorrow. What we need to understand about caveat emptor, the burden of discovery of learning about the property is on who? It's not on the seller to disclose. The burden is on the buyer to learn about it. This is why the buyer, in part, why the buyer has a due diligence period. Give them that opportunity to investigate, to inspect. Guys, the burden of discovery is on the buyer. When the buyer hires an agent, we take on that responsibility with them. So when the buyer hires us as their buyer's agent, we take on that responsibility to investigate and learn about the property with them. Remember what I said earlier. If it's important to my buyer, then it's important to me. If my buyer says, I want to investigate something, I'm not going to say, no, you don't need to do that. You're fine. We're not going to do that. If my buyer wants to investigate something, my answer is, okie doke, let's do it. Our offer to purchase and contract has a list of things that buyers should consider investigating. I will let your 302 class go through that list, discuss that more with you. I think it's important that we understand that that list is not inclusive. So if there's something not on that list that your buyer wants to investigate, again, we say, sure, let's do it. Back to our stigmatized properties. I've had other agents tell me that during the buyer's due diligence, they want to bring the priest over. They want to have the priest come in and make sure there's no bad vibes in the home, negative energy in the home. I'll let you keep your opinions, your thoughts on that to yourself. But if your buyer wants to have the priest come over, what are you going to say? Okie doke, when's a good time for everybody to come over? That's not for me to decide. Y'all want to hear a funny story? Some of you may have heard this before, but I had a post-licensing student once, her very first buyer ever. She said everything seemed normal until they went under contract. And they got under contract, and her buyers called her and said that they've been talking to this 1-800 fortune teller. And this 1-800 fortune teller told her to put something, some kind of ceramic bunny in the house. And whatever this bunny did or did not do would tell them the energy of the house. I imagine that buyer, some of you look very confused by what I'm telling you, right? Right. Is this something that I don't know, it's not for me to decide, you know? So this, her very first buyer, y'all, and she's got people babbling on about a 1-800 fortune teller and a ceramic bunny. And she called her broker in charge and she said, what do I do? You know what her BIC told her? Get the damn bunny in the house, because it was important to the buyer. So it's important to us, right? It's not for me to say, don't listen to your 1-800 fortune teller. If it's important to my buyer, then it's important to me. Sellers don't have to disclose. We're going to look at our RPOs and our MOG, all of our seller disclosures, when we get into working with sellers in this next section. Although they don't have to disclose, they still can't lie. Sellers could be held liable if they lie. The buyer may take action after settlement. They got to hire an attorney. So when the buyer calls you and says the RPOs say the roof doesn't leak, but in fact it does, what do? You tell them to call their attorney. The seller can't induce the buyer to forego any inspections. Everything's fine. Save yourself some money. You don't need to have a home inspection. If a seller told me that, I would have multiple red flags go up. Would you not? I mean, lots of red flags. I fear this is happening in this market. Some buyers are saying that they're going to forego the home inspection to try to make their offer more attractive to the seller. That should be the buyer's choice if they're foregoing the home inspection. That should not be the seller saying, I'll accept your offer if you sign here saying you won't have a home inspection. You guys with me? The buyer has that opportunity available to them. The buyer needs to be the one to decide. The seller could also be liable if they don't provide the seller disclosures. Again, we'll talk about our RPOs and our MOG in the next section, and we'll talk about what the buyer's out is if the seller fails to provide the seller disclosures. North Carolina, homes are sold as is. Is the seller required or under any obligation to do repairs? Nope. We can always ask, will you fix this? They don't have to. Even as is homes doesn't affect our duty to disclose material facts. We always have a duty to discover and disclose material facts. And there's one, this all stems from one very important sentence in our offer to purchase and contract, but isn't this a powerful sentence? Our contract says this property is being sold in its current condition. Again, another complaint, common complaint at the commission as a result of this crazy market that we're in right now. Buyers are putting down ridiculous amounts of due diligence, thinking if they find something wrong, the seller, well, I gave them $50,000. Why wouldn't they fix the electrical? Your buyer needs to understand that even though they put down $50,000, the seller's still not obligated to fix the electrical, right? They're dancing out in the streets with their $50,000. They can do whatever they want to with it. They're not prepaying for electrical work to be done. I can't tell my buyer not to put down $50,000. All I can do is educate my buyer about what happens if they put down $50,000 and they terminate. I got to make sure they're comfortable with it. I had a coworker the other day say that she's created a form for her buyers to have them sign off on, and it talks about stuff like due diligence and earnest money. And she said she's got it in big bold, all caps. If you you will not get your money back. And she was like, I need them to understand that. They can all acknowledge their head that they hear, but are they actually hearing what you're saying? Until they do a home inspection, find a problem and say, well, I'm going to terminate. I want my $50,000 back. And yes, Chastity, awesome. Very good point. Not all states practice due diligence. Not all states have a due diligence fee and a due diligence period. So if you're a first-time buyer, I promise you in North Carolina, they've never heard of this. But if you have a buyer coming from another state, this may be new to them as well. We owe this duty to all of our buyers. The Real Estate Commission within the last couple months published an article on this. And basically they said due diligence hasn't changed. This market has not changed due diligence. Even put down $10, $100, or $10,000, it's still for the same thing. Craziest one I heard, Plummer was talking about his private Facebook groups, real estate groups. And there was one I saw a couple months ago. The property was like $425,000. They went under contract at $425,000. The buyer offered, y'all ready for this? Brace yourself. It was like $175,000 in due diligence. Where are these people getting this money? I don't have $175,000 left. That's what I want to know. Where are you getting this money? And how? I mean, that's the person you want to take to Vegas with you, right? They're going to have a good time if they have that kind of money to just, you know what that tells me? They really, really wanted this house really bad. If they really, really want it, they need to be willing to do what it takes to get it. So what happens if we breach our liabilities to our client? What happens if we breach our agent duties? Well, as we've been saying, could face disciplinary action by the Real Estate Commission. So I don't want to see you guys wind up in the e-bulletin. The injured party could sue you. They could take you to court and they could sue you. In addition to suing you and putting a fine on you, you can also lose your commission. So if you mishandle the transaction, if you did get paid, they could take it back. How much was the earnest money in that? I don't think there was earnest money. I think they just rolled with $175,000 due diligence. I hope there wasn't earnest money. And then criminal prosecution. Is it important that we understand license law and commission rule? If you're not sure of the answer to that question, please look at this slide again and look at it again. And maybe even a fourth time if that's necessary. This is our livelihood, you guys. Our agency agreements are a two-way street. So when the firm enters into an agency agreement with a buyer or a seller, we owe them duties and responsibilities, but guess what? They owe us some stuff too. It's a contractual bilateral agreement. So the biggest duties that the principal owes us, they owe us the duty to act in good faith. It'd be awfully hard for me to sell somebody's home if the seller never allows showings. What if the seller's sick today and they ask to not have showings today? Is that different than the seller never allowing somebody in the front door? I mean, let's be reasonable, you know? If you're not feeling well today, I probably want to go in your house anyway, right? I don't want what you got. So if you're not feeling well today, if your family, if your whole household's come down with the stomach bug, we'll give you a couple days. That's different. Sometimes I see showing instructions that, you know, maybe there's a new baby and nap time is from 1 to 3. So there's no showings from 1 to 3. They can be reasonable. We can work together. That's different than never allowing showings. I think the best showing instructions that I've ever seen, this is where punctuation counts. The showing instructions said, new baby and dog may bite. There's a warning for you. So they have to act in good faith. Buyer too. If the buyer never decides on a property to see, I can't show them anything, right? So if you tell me you want a 3-bed, 2-bath with a garage in this area, then I'll show you what I got. You don't have to buy it, but you can't. No. We have to act. They have to act in good faith. And then all of our agency agreements promise to pay us. Again, our agency agreements are employment contract. Employment contracts have to discuss compensation. We briefly looked at our listing agreement. We'll look more closely at it and our buyer's agency agreement when we get into those sections. As we've mentioned, the principal can't lie. If they do lie and we act on that lie, we have no way of knowing it's a lie. We're acting on what our principal tells us. They may be liable, not only the party that they lied to, but they may also be liable for our wrongful conduct. Again, this is up for the judge to decide. I think it's going to be pretty hard to determine this. That's why I say with caution, you know, we're in a world today where it's easy to sue somebody, right? That's our knee-jerk reaction. I'm going to sue you. That doesn't mean you're going to win. That doesn't mean you have a case. You can sue anybody for anything. If your buyer after settlement feels that they were lied to, have them talk to a litigation attorney and see what their choices are, see what their options are. Y'all got your private chat ready? I got another A, B, C, and D ready for you. So private chat to me. Tell me in a private chat, in North Carolina, the Doctrine of Caveat Emptor You guys are good. Caveat emptor, still intact for property owners in real estate transactions. And what we're saying to here, what we're referring to here, does the seller have to disclose anything? No. The onus is on the buyer to learn about the property. Questions, comments? The last little piece of this first section is to briefly mention our agency agreements, but specifically talk about our agency disclosures. We got to make sure that the consumer knows where we stand in the transaction. This is one rule I think you should know. You're not going to be tested on this, but anytime you're dealing with agency, Commission Rule 58A.0104 is the rule that regulates our agency agreements and disclosure. Again, we're going to look at agency agreements. We'll look at the sellers when we talk about the sellers, and the buyers when we talk about the buyers, and property management when we talk about property management. But let's talk about agency disclosure. Show me, how many of you are active? How many of you, let me rephrase it. How many of you have worked with buyers and at least met a buyer or seller? How many of you have had the opportunity to do your agency disclosure with a buyer or seller, to go over your, I call it your elevator speech, go through your spiel? The first couple times you did it, was it awkward? Was it bumpy? Did you feel like you didn't know what you were doing? Trust me, it gets better. The more you do it, the more practice you get, the better it's going to get. There's nothing, I hate to say, easy about it. Consumers are weary of us when they first meet us. And one of the first things we do is bust out with this form that we need them to sign. And so it's important that we explain it properly. First and foremost, one of the first things it says is, this is not a contract. It is a disclosure, and it's the opportunity for me to disclose my status. Doesn't the consumer deserve to know that? Don't they deserve to know where I stand in the transaction? There are a lot of agents. This is another complaint down at the commission. And actually, where this comes up at the commission, when a complaint is made and the commission sends you the letter of inquiry and asks you to send your documentation in, and they say, where's your working with real estate agent disclosure? There are so many agents out there, you guys, that don't do this properly. They don't disclose, they don't do it, or they just say, here you go, sign this. So it's important that we, and it comes with practice. It comes with practice. Get with your firm, role play. I hate role playing. I feel so dumb standing there talking to you about pretend you're a buyer coming to my open house. But you know what? It works because it helps put words in your mouth. And I think that's what a lot of it is practice, practice, and practice. So why must, do you guys see my absolute word there? Why must we do our agency disclosure? The Real Estate Commission says we need to ensure that the consumer understands, big thing, I don't know you confidentiality until you decide to hire me. If you never hire me, I never owe you confidentiality. Don't you think that's important for the consumer to know? Careful what you tell me, because I don't owe you confidentiality. The second point of this is to introduce consumers to available agency options. Again, when we look at our disclosure in just a second, we're going to check the box. We are going to check the boxes of the type of agency that my firm offers. We're not checking the boxes of the type of agency we're going to do. We check the boxes of the agency that my firm offers. We'll see that in just a second. We need to make sure that we get that disclosure, review it, and discuss it with them no later than first substantial contact. Those of you out there working with consumers, can you agree with me that people talk? Oh my gosh, it blows my mind. People will call you and start telling you their life story. You don't even know their name yet. Stop talking. Please stop talking. Once we hit first substantial contact, it's too late to do disclosures. We need to interrupt them before they go on. We always need, when we're working in the capacity of an agent, we always need to be on alert for first substantial contact. Now, let's be honest about this. Let's be reasonable. It's never too early to do it, but there is a time when it's too late. So with that being said, am I gonna shove this in the face of every buyer that comes into my open house? Hey, welcome to my open house. Let's do agency disclosure. I don't necessarily need to do it to every buyer that comes in, but I need to be on alert for first substantial contact. What if I'm doing a buyer consultation? I have an hour meeting with buyers. Is it fair to say at some point in that hour, I may learn something that may count as first substantial contact? Yeah. So if you're doing an hour consultation, why wouldn't we do our working with real estate agent disclosure first? Thank you for meeting me at my office or Starbucks or Panera or wherever. Before we begin, let me explain my role. Same thing when you're working with sellers. When you go to your first listing appointment. Competitive listing appointments are very real, which means your seller's talking to more than one agent. If they're talking to, I don't know, what do you want? 3, 4 agents and they don't hire you, you don't know them confidentiality, right? Isn't it fair that we discuss that with them before they start talking? You go to a listing appointment, you walk in the front door, they're proud. They want to give you the grand tour. They want to show off. It's their home. They want to tell you everything. Okay, and I can't wait to get the grand tour. But before we do, let's sit down at the kitchen table or breakfast table or living room, whatever, and look at our agency disclosure. You guys with me? This is the best way we can protect the consumer is by telling them up front, I don't know you confidentiality. Careful what you tell me until you decide to hire me. Plummer, you had a...
Yes. Is this the same approach to, let's say, a lead coming in? You got a lead from your big whatever, and you know it says, you know, it's a buyer, da 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 da, and you know, first call. You know, thanks for taking my call. You know, I'm just following up on a I don't know, inquiry you did on our website. Right. Exactly.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because that
before we
person that
begin,
came from realtor.com is a consumer. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So before I start asking a lot of questions that could reveal first substantial contact information, right? I need to be alert on them talking, but I can't ask a lot of questions without first disclosing my status.
All right. So
And
before we
it's the
begin, let me
individual
explain.
agent. This doesn't follow the firm. So Plummer, let's say you and I are with the same firm. The buyer talks to me on one property and maybe they get a hold of you for another property. We still have to both, because it's the agent disclosing to the consumer their status. You with me? So even though we're in the same firm, and they may look at you and say, I already signed this. Okay, well, sign it again with me. I would word that a little bit nicer if I were you, but you're with me, right? You're with me. Sign it again with me.
I just like that statement. Yeah, before we begin, let me explain my role.
There you go. There you go. I mean, I don't think we should be meeting buyers for the first time at vacant houses by ourselves. That's just me, male or female. I think safety first. We are going to talk about safety tomorrow because I do think safety always first. There's no amount of commission worth our safety. And if you don't believe me, just ask your family this evening over dinner and see what they tell you. So before you run out and meet a buyer at a vacant home, if it's not reasonable to get to your office, have them meet you, buy them a coffee, right? Have them meet you somewhere. You can sit down at a Starbucks, have a quick coffee. This way you've been seen in public together. You know that they are serious because they're meeting you at Starbucks. What do we do while we're sitting here? Ooh, we can do our working with real estate agent disclosure, right? So that's one thing that we can kind of do up front. Working with real estate agent disclosure only applies to sales transactions. It does not apply to lease. Some property management companies have their own working with real estate agent disclosure, but understand it's not required. The Real Estate Commission says only sales transaction. That does include residential sales and commercial sales. Sales is sales. I don't care if you're selling an office building or a condo. Sales is sales. Again, we always need to be on alert for first substantial contact. Anytime you're acting like an agent, you need to be on alert for first substantial contact. You guys join your firms. Were you guys encouraged to wear your name tag everywhere you go? Why do they want you? No? Well, okay, I'm telling you, wear your name tag everywhere you go. Why am I telling you to wear your name tag everywhere you go? Because I want strangers to come up to you and talk to you about real estate, right? So when you're at Harris Teeter this afternoon in aisle 4, I want them to see your name tag and go, ooh, real estate. I got some. People like to talk about real estate. So if you're in aisle 4 of Harris Teeter wearing your name tag, do you need to be on alert for first substantial contact? Yeah, because they could walk up to you and say, oh my God. I mean, guys, everybody's going to tell you they want to buy or sell. This is where price, term, and motive come into place. Is there a difference in, I would like to buy a house one day versus, man, am I glad I see you. I have to buy something within the next 2 months. You kind of hear the difference. And that's the kind of, whoa, stop. Let's walk out to my car together. I got a form in my trunk that we need to talk about. Yes, I carry those things around in my trunk. I am ready to go at a moment's notice. I had a listing a couple years ago. And back in the day, it was our team, and the team all took turns answering the phone. Like we have one centralized number, and we all took turns. So one of my teammates answered the call, and it was one of my listings. And the woman, thank you for calling. How may I help you? And the woman said, I'm interested in 123 Main Street, and I'm pre-approved for $150,000. Boom. First substantial. We didn't even know the girl's name yet, but we knew what her pre-approval was for. I know what she was doing. She was proving to us that she was a serious buyer. I get what she was doing. She wasn't just out there kicking tires. But what did she do if she made an offer less than $150,000? Now I got to tell my seller, I know darn well she can pay more. Let's count her. You guys with me? And my teammate said, whoa, please stop talking. I need to explain this to you. I need to share this with you. Da, 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 da. And you know what that woman said? That woman said, you're about the 3rd company that I've called and the first person to explain this to me. How do you think she felt about the other 2 companies that didn't care about what she said? Blah, 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 blah. Guys, sometimes, I don't know about you. Let's talk about how we were raised. I was raised that it was rude to interrupt people. When people were talking, it's rude to interrupt. This is one case, and y'all don't say I said this, but mama was wrong, wasn't she? Woo, that even hurts to say it. But seriously, it wasn't that mama was wrong. Mama just didn't know about first substantial contact. And we need to make sure we are rude if we let them keep talking. Everybody good with that? We're rude when we let them keep talking. Okay, now that you've told me your life story, let me tell you, I don't know you confidentiality, and I have a duty to go back and share that with my seller. Too late. We always need to be on alert. First substantial contact. We can define first substantial contact a couple different ways. First substantial contact is that point in time when either the broker and the consumer begin to act as if an agency relationship exists. Maybe I just start acting like your agent. Maybe you think I'm your agent. The buyer or the consumer thinks you're my agent. So that point in time when we act as if an agency relationship exists, or it could be that point in time when the consumer discloses, when the consumer tells me their needs, their desires, their wants about a property to be sold or purchased. Again, there's a big difference in I have to sell within the next 3 years versus I have to sell within the next 3 months. We're talking about a different sense of urgency, aren't we? We're talking about a different, again, everybody will tell you they want to buy or sell. Everybody. What's that sense of urgency? So the point in time when the consumer starts disclosing information about a property, or first substantial contact can be that point in time when we start discussing PTM, price, term, and motive. Those should be the 3 flags that we're constantly on the lookout for. How much are you willing to purchase, pay for a home? How low is the seller willing to go? What's their motive for buying or selling? What's their sense of urgency? And what terms would they see acceptable? What terms would they consider acceptable? Once again, you guys, we can talk about the property all day long. We need to be on alert for when we start learning about the people. Back to my earlier question I asked you guys. Can I make anybody do anything? Nope. And that includes getting them to sign the disclosure. I can't make anybody sign it, right? If the consumer refuses to sign it, the best we can do is write, refuse to sign. If you know a name, which I hope you do, if you're meeting them at a vacant house, you can put the name down. You know, John Smith refused to sign. What if they come to your open house though? You may not know their name, right? So you can say, you know, person that came to my open house on this date refused to sign. You know, I would have some kind of identifying. If you get the letter of inquiry from the commission, if you're facing possible disciplinary action and they send you a letter of inquiry, I don't know what the complaint is going to be about, but I promise you, they're always going to want to see your agency disclosure and your agency agreement. Every single complaint, the letter of inquiry is going to ask for disclosure and agreement. And if you say, I have an agreement, but I don't have a disclosure, the real estate commission could say, well, this launches a whole new investigation, doesn't it? I don't think we get in trouble. I don't think the consumer complains about us not doing the disclosure. I think that's something that they find. My firm uses Dotloop. You guys may have Zip Forms or DocuSign or SkySlope. There's so many out there right now. Every single year, I create a new loop. This year, for example, mine is called WWREA 2022. And every single disclosure I get this year is going to go into that loop. Maybe those will turn into a transaction. Maybe I'll never, ever see these people again. But I keep all of my disclosures. And how long do I keep them? 3 years. Keep everything for 3 years. So if the commission says, well, gee, you're missing the disclosure for this transaction, how about you show me all of your disclosures for 2021? And you say, well, I don't have any of those either, right? I don't think the complaint goes down that you didn't do the disclosure. I think it's something that the commission finds once they start investigating a complaint.
Julie, what do you do? Just download them and connect them to that loop?
Yeah, I can, you know, take a picture of them, create a PDF. Yep.
Cool. That's a good idea.
Yep. That came from my, you know, over 20 years in the industry. When I first started, we didn't have Dotloop. What you call it? DocuSign? What? And we actually had, there was a drawer in the main office. Then all the drawer had I can't think, file folders, that's what they're called. The file folders. And every agent in the firm had their own file folder. So you get a working with real estate agent disclosure sign, you put it in the drawer. And if the commission ever shows up and says, show me your disclosure, we could say, here you go. No beads of sweat coming off us because we knew we were in compliance.
Do you use that for property disclosure and your MOG and all of that stuff too? Or
What's
just
that? Dot loop?
like, yeah, do you do it or just for,
Sometimes, to me, I think it's easier to have them do it in writing instead of putting all those dang check boxes on it. That comes down to a preference thing. The commission doesn't care how we do it. Just do it. Yep. All right, time for our last breaks. Let's take 10. We come back. We're not done talking about disclosure yet. We got a little bit more to talk about. So let's come back in 10 and we'll finish up for the day. All right. How are we for the last 45 minutes or so? Anybody hanging in there with me? All right. I don't know what happened to the first file I have, but I did reload it. Now it came up. So in Learn Test Pass under Campbell, we have section 2. This is this year's general update. And there's this whole section on racial equality. One thing I like about the CE information, just for you guys going forward, it kind of gives you these questions and scenarios. The answers are always at the end of the section. So, you know, case studies really help us, like part of the reason we have the law and the rule that we do today is the result of the case studies. So looking at the case studies kind of helps us see where we got to where we are. I have, like I said, I went through and highlighted the things that we talked about. So what you may need to know for your test, I've already talked about. We got you covered in Donna's copy of the syllabus, not mine apparently, but Donna has that information. But I also have it here highlighted. So we define disparate impact. We define implicit basis and the different definitions of racial equality. Here's the real estate's commitment to racial equality. This is what we saw on their homepage. So if you can see that easier here, then it's provided here as well. The rule changes or amendments that we discussed, the rules that support the commission's efforts for racial equality are highlighted here. Again, more case scenarios, case studies. This link, if it's not active, you can copy and paste it, but it'll take you to Fair Housing's advertising guidelines. So if you want to access that, again, it's all in this document. More stuff for discussion with everything in the back. A further in-depth about implicit basis, causes for implicit basis. How do you reduce as a broker? The Housing Choice Voucher Program, our Section 8 housing. Like we said, there's certain things, the Housing Choice Voucher Program says is there's certain things that the landlord, 13 things that qualify standards at the beginning of occupancy. So sanitary features, you know, cleanliness, disposal, that kind of thing. Those are all important things that landlords of a public housing assistance program need to follow. Disparate impact. So again, what we talked about, but I have it here too, so you can see the discussions. And you can also see the case studies, the scenarios. So that's all in Learn Test Pass. Now, and the answers to everything. I find it important, and you guys are going to start noticing, I know most of you didn't have to take CE this year, but once you start taking CE, I always find it interesting. Sometimes topics that show up in CE are topics that we learned in pre-licensing. Agency shows up in CE every once in a while. Material facts show up in CE every once in a while. Based on the conference I went to with the commission, and they said misrepresentation and omission were big complaints. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see those in a CE class. So sometimes things that we talked about, see, it's good to go back and refresh. Yes, it's good to go back and review. And that's why they keep refreshing these topics to us. So if when you're in it 10, 20 years from now, you may get a nice refresher on agency or material facts. Contract formation pops up in CE every once in a while. And of course, anytime there's a new law or a new rule, they'll make sure we get that information as well. So when it comes to our agency disclosure, let's talk about what the commission says about it. The commission rule regarding our agency disclosure says we're required to provide disclosure. Disclosure is referring to the working with real estate agent disclosure. We're required to disclose it no later than first substantial contact. Once you've hit first substantial contact, we got to get rude and interrupt. Don't let them keep talking to be polite. Interrupt them and say, I am being polite by interrupting you because you need to know all this stuff you're blabbing to me. I have a duty to share with my client. The disclosure gives us the opportunity to discuss the different agency relationships that my firm may offer. Again, these aren't what we are going to do. This is what my firm offers. And we'll look at our disclosure in just a second. And the commission rule says at the time of going over the agency disclosure, at that time, we need to determine in what capacity we're going to work. Are you going to be my client or my customer? Because haven't we already decided I owe different duties to my client than I do my customer? So if I don't know our relationship, how do I know how to act? How do I know how to proceed? Commission rule when discussing first substantial contact. If it's in person for face-to-face, we're going to do our disclosure. I can hand it to them and say, sign here. How do I get a copy? Well, maybe I leave them an original and I take a picture for my files. Or maybe I just have two. Let's sign two, one for you and one for me, right? They need a copy and I need a copy. Somehow we need to get both of us a copy. What if first substantial contact happens over the phone or over email? Remember, I just told you about our consumer. As soon as we picked up the phone, didn't even know the girl's name, but we knew how much she was pre-approved for. Same thing could happen in an email, right? You could get an email from your website that says, I'm interested in your property and I have to buy right away, right? They could just type their whole life story to you. If first substantial contact does not happen face-to-face, we still need to discuss it with them. We still need to have a conversation with them. But now commission rule says I have up to 3 days to get the disclosure in their hand. So even though we're on the phone or we're in an email, doesn't mean that I don't discuss it. We can have a conversation. Send me your email address and I'll be happy to send you this form. So in person, we can get it in front of them. But if it's not in person, we're still going to discuss it. And we need to get them the disclosure within 3 days. First substantial contact can be different whether you're working with buyers or sellers. When you're working with a prospective seller, it's not uncommon for first substantial contact to happen when you're scheduling the listing. Now, again, you're on the phone, and if all you say is they say, I want a list, and you say, great, I'll be there tomorrow at 2, right? Okay, we haven't really hit first substantial contact. We're getting close. But I think more often than not, first substantial contact is going to happen when they call us to ask if we can help them list. The latest is when we walk in their front door. We walk in their front door and we plan on an hour listing appointment. Again, is it fair to say at some point in that hour, something's going to be said that hits first substantial contact? Absolutely. So like Plummer said, let's just get this out of the way now. The first thing we're going to do is sit down and talk about, because sellers need to understand, again, competitive listing appointments are very real right now. And if your seller's talking to 3 agents, they need to understand that until they decide to hire you, you don't owe them that confidentiality. So what if they go with one of the other agents? What if they have the nerve to hire somebody else? You don't owe them that confidentiality. We also need to discuss material facts before sellers start going through the house and pointing out all the problems to us. They need to understand that what they're pointing out to us are facts that we have to disclose. We need to ask questions, but they need to be aware up front and early on that while they don't have to disclose material facts, we do. So make sure you have that discussion. When you meet a prospective buyer for the first time, we're going to do our working with real estate agents disclosure. I need to do that before I can show a property, before I start asking lots of questions. What do you want to buy? How much do you want to pay? Again, you guys, this takes practice. I don't know of anybody that does this perfect the first couple times they do it. First time I did it, I thought, my gosh, I sound like this babbling idiot, this babbling fool. I promise you, I've gotten better. Let's call it your elevator speech, right? You got to get it out while you have their attention. So you practice. You do it a couple times and you will get better. I promise. When it comes to existing relationships, maybe I already have a relationship with my seller. Maybe I already have a relationship with my buyer. There's commission rule on when I disclose my status to the other side when I already have a relationship. So what we've been talking about so far is the seller's agent. The first time you meet a prospective buyer, we don't have to disclose that status until first substantial contact. You come, just because you come to my open house doesn't mean I need to throw my working with real estate agent disclosure at you. You can walk in and out of my open house. Maybe all we do is share names and niceties and the buyer leaves, right? The only time we need to worry about it, example, at an open house, is when the buyer hits first substantial contact or before that moment, if we start feeling the conversation heading that way. If you're a buyer's agent and you're contacting the seller or the seller's agent, we need to disclose our status, not necessarily the working with real estate agent disclosure, but our status at initial contact. Initial contact is, hi, my name is Julie Campbell, and I'm working with a buyer that's interested in your listing at 123 Main Street. Let's say my buyer wants to see 123 Main Street tomorrow. And they call and they say, can you schedule this appointment for tomorrow? And I say, sure. Here in the Triad MLS, we use a centralized showing service called Showing Time. So I go to Showing Time to schedule all of my showings. And when I'm scheduling my showings, I have to identify my role. Am I a buyer's agent? Am I a seller sub-agent? The request goes to the seller and the listing agent. They get an email that says, Julie Campbell, comma, buyer's agent, comma, wants to see your listing tomorrow at 2 o'clock. That's the system helping me disclose my status at initial contact. Once they hear my name, they should know my role. Does that make sense to you guys? What if my buyer says, I want to see a property tomorrow, but before we go, I have a couple questions. Will you call the listing agent? You bet I will. I call the listing agent. I say, hey there, this is Julie Campbell with XYZ Realty, and I'm working with a buyer, or I'm working as a buyer's agent that's interested in seeing your property, but we have a couple questions first. Didn't I identify my role? Didn't I tell them as early as I possibly could that I have a buyer, that I'm a buyer's agent or a seller sub-agent? I'm not doing disclosure here. I'm disclosing my status. Also in our working with real estate agent disclosure is disclosure of whether or not the firm practices dual agency. Again, if the firm offers dual agency, designated dual agency, we're going to see that disclosed. We're getting ready to look at that right now. You guys good? Everybody good? Okay. So let's go into Learn, Test, Pass. Again, you guys, please get set up on this tonight. I'll Learn, Test, Pass tonight. Remember, if you have problems, just get with Jane. Watch the little tutorial. It'll walk you through how to set yourself up. And if you get stuck on anything, just reach out to Jane. But there's good stuff in here. So the section 1 material we have are working with real estate agent disclosure form. There are, some people will tell you there's 2 disclosures. Some will tell you it's one front and back, paid, front and back, however you want to do it. What we need to get is that there's a disclosure when you're talking to sellers. There's a disclosure when you're talking to buyers. So the first one we have here is working with sellers. It tells us this form is required for use in all sales transactions, and that includes residential and commercial. Let's just take that question out of it. It starts with a big important, and what's the very first thing it says? This form is not a contract. This did not create agency. This is a disclosure. Signing this disclosure only means that you've received it. In a real estate transaction, it's important that you understand whether an agent represents you. Real estate agents are required to review this form with you at first substantial contact before asking for or receiving your confidential information, and give you a copy after you've signed it. This is for your own protection. And then it says, do not share any confidential information with the agent or assume that the agent is acting on your own behalf until you have entered into a written agency agreement with the agent to represent you. Otherwise, the agent can share your confidential information with others. Well, there it is right there, right? Remember what I said about helping the forms put words in your mouth? You don't have to worry about that. They say it for you. I don't owe you confidentiality until you decide to hire me. Then we have a note to agent. Check all relationship types below that may apply to this seller. Does everybody see this? These are the different ways. This isn't how we're going to work. These are the types of relationships that my firm has to offer. Questions on that? We just got this. By the way, this form it's not a year old yet. We just got it in July. It's much better than what we had before. Trust me, much better. And now that we have this, we have a little bit more, I hate to say control, but I think it does a better job of explaining the type of agency options available. So the first agency, our seller's agency, the listing agent, the agent who gave you this form and the agent's firm must enter into a written listing agreement with you before they begin to market your property for sale. If you sign the listing agreement, the listing firm and its agents would represent you. The buyer would either be represented by an agent affiliated with a different firm or be unrepresented. The agent can, if the firm offers dual agency. Dual agency will occur if your listing firm has a buyer client who wants to purchase your property. If you agree in a written agency agreement, and the real estate firm and any agent within the same firm would be permitted to represent you and the buyer at the same time. A dual agent's loyalty would be divided between you and the buyer, but the firm and its agents must treat you and the buyer fairly and equally and cannot help you gain one advantage over the other party. Does your firm offer designated dual agency? If so, check that box. If you agree in a written agency agreement, the real estate firm would represent both you and the buyer, but the firm would designate one agent to represent you and a different agent to represent the buyer. Each designated agent would be loyal only to their client. I got a whole section set aside for dual and designated, so we'll be able to talk a little bit more about that. I could also be presenting this form to a FSBO. The firm may be willing to work with a FSBO. This is an unrepresented seller. The agent who gave you this form will not be representing you and has no loyalty to you. The agent will represent only the buyer. Do not share any confidential information with this agent. Then there's a note to seller for more information. Refer to the Q&A brochure, which I got for you guys. We'll look at that as well. Seller sign, print their name, agent's name with our license number, and then the firm name. Agent's license number is required here. So page 1 is to the seller. Page 2 then is for working with the buyers. And again, we're going to see the same verbiage. The important is still the same. It's still important, buyer or seller. Don't owe you confidentiality. The agency options that we have available, buyer agency. If you agree, the agent who gave you this form will represent you as a buyer's agent and be loyal to you. You can begin with an oral agreement, but your agent must enter into a written buyer agency agreement with you before making a written offer or oral offer for you. The seller would either be represented by an agent affiliated with a different real estate firm or be unrepresented. Again, if your firm offers dual or designated, we would check those boxes. And then the last option for buyer is that unrepresented buyer where you're going to be a seller subagent. The agent who gave you this form may assist you in your purchase, but will not be representing you and has no loyalty to you. The agent represents who? The seller. They're a subagent. They're an agent of the agent. Do not share any confidential information with this agent. Buyer sign, agent's name, agent's license number. What comments do we have about our disclosures? I think they cover our basis. And I think if we're familiar what it says, this could be our elevator speech, right? I mean, I don't think reading it to them, but I think if we can take this information, make it part of our elevator speech, and then they're seeing in words what we're saying. So that helps to reinforce what we're saying as well. And then again, the agent checks these boxes. The consumer does not check these boxes. The agent is the one that says, this is the type of agency that my firm has to offer. The other thing I learned test passed, I love this. I was so happy. Y'all, the former working with real estate agent brochure looked similar to this, but it was hard, it was complicated, it was easy to explain or hard to explain. There was a tear off panel. So after we explained it, they signed it and they were supposed to walk away with the brochure and we were supposed to keep the tear off panel. I'll tell you, if about July 1st, 2021, you heard this resounding woohoo across the state of North Carolina, that was all of us brokers celebrating the fact that the disclosure has been replaced. We have the disclosure we have today, and now we have this Q&A brochure. Question comes in, what if they only want to sign this form but no agency agreement? Remember, we're not necessarily forming agency. Maybe they just come into my open house and I never ever see these people again, right? So it might just be that I'm just disclosing my status or I'm showing one property. They leave that home and I never see them again. I still have this form. Again, the important thing is that I disclose my status. And the really important thing is that they understand that I don't know them confidentiality. That's why I have my folder, my www REA 2022. I'm going to have more of these in the folder than I'm going to have agency agreements. I wish I could tell you all these turn into agency agreements. I wish I could tell you that. Some of them may, but not all of them are.
So
Again,
Julie,
it
would that
goes down, the
protect,
commission's gonna ask for it? Yeah.
would that protect you, like if you were doing an open house, let's say, and you have, you have them sign this or whatever, and then they call into, the firm we work for and speak to another agent, and say, I want you to show me this property. Is that going to protect you? Kind of, or
It's the individual agent, so it doesn't follow the firm.
okay.
So if you have buyers out there calling several different firms and hitting first substantial contact with several different agents,
Okay.
they should be getting one of these every time. Right. So it's not just because, well, I've done one with the firm, because we just mentioned the firm name, right? It's the agent's name and the license number. So it's going to attach to the agent. That's why we need to keep our disclosures.
So, but let's just say that I meet them at the open house
Mhm.
and then they call in to the firm that I work for and they talk to another agent in my firm. Does that and they say, okay, I'm interested in buying this property. Is that should they come back? The person that they speak to on the phone probably should come back to me, or, you know what I'm saying?
No, because this is not a contract.
Okay.
You're not forming any relationship with them. You're just disclosing your status. And the other agent in your firm needs to disclose their status.
Mm-hmm.
And the other agent in their firm needs to disclose their status.
Gotcha.
Because every house you're going to have a different status, right? You can't have all the listings.
Oh, come on.
So you may, Donna, may I ask, and you don't have to answer, you can say, Julie, I'm not going to answer that, but you're on site agent. Yes. Do I remember that correctly?
Both. Yeah. Yeah.
You
I
work
am.
on site. So when you're on site, are you on alert for buyers coming in for substantial contact? I mean, maybe they come in with their agent, maybe they don't.
Do you know a lot of them will walk in without agents?
So when they walk in the door of your model home,
that is the first question I ask. Well,
are you
not the
working with an
first.
agent?
Yeah.
And
Are you working with an agent? I kind of
yeah,
throw that in to the, the first bit of conversation.
and you're on alert for that first substantial contact.
yeah.
Well, even if they have an agent,
Yes.
because I mean, first off, you guys, if you're a buyer's agent and you're sending your buyer to a model home, why aren't you going with them? Right? It's okay to go with them and look at it. But even if they say yes, it's not that you're trying to get them as a buyer. You're not trying to take them. You're just notifying them of your relationship with your builder, right? What you tell me, I have to tell my builder. And that's what this form is.
But you would not believe agents that
Yes, I would.
get very, very mad that their clients come without them. And then they say, oh, well, I talked to Donna with, this community, and they're like, oh my gosh, she's trying to pick them up as her client. And, yeah, so
either, what's the real estate commission say, or what do the other agents say? You with me?
yes.
Obviously they don't understand the disclosure, because you're
Right.
not trying to pick them up. You're not trying to take them.
No.
You're protecting them by
Right.
letting them know that you represent the buyer. You're
Right.
protecting them by letting them know that what they tell you, you have to tell your builder. I think it's a buyer, but your builder,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
You're
builder.
protecting them.
Right. Okay.
My
Yes.
my firm works with a couple builders, and we have some on-site homes. And the last time I went to an event at one of our model homes, I was just blown away. I walked in the front door and there was a sign right there on the counter that said, "The agents in this office represent the builder. We do not represent you in your best interest." It was like, boom, right there. When, talk about a way. But they had, oh, by the way, since we've discussed it, let me get you to sign this, because that builder doesn't want our agents working with buyers. So those on-site agents, and I think a lot of builders would say the same thing, those on-site agents can't try to get them as a buyer, right? Builder doesn't like it. And that's what we need to understand. I'm not trying to create agency yet. I am just trying to let you know up front where I stand, what my status is, and that I don't know you confidentiality. And when the other agent calls you and says, you're trying to take my, no, I'm doing my job. What the real estate commission says, I'm protecting your buyers by warning them about this. Yeah, Plumber, sorry about that.
No, I was gonna say, I forget what class I took where they said it's, it's kind of like what the cops do. They Mirandize them. Yeah, anything you say can be held against you. So
we're Mirandaizing
yeah.
Or now we're Mirandaizing the consumer. Anything you say can be held against you, not in a court of law, but in the transaction in this transaction. The house across the street might have a different agent, right? So different disclosure could be required, different disclosure. When I bought my little condo, it was like 2006, and I was in real estate, but I didn't have my license yet. So I had to have an agent in the office help me, which is fine. I had like 70 agents that I was working for at the time. So it was like, I want to work with that one. And she wasn't available to show me a condo one day. So she had another agent in the firm that I worked for, that I was employed with, meet me at the condo to show it to me. She showed up with the working real estate agent. She said, I know I already know you, but the commission says you need to sign it. So we signed this. And I was like, wow, good job. When my husband and I bought this house 2 years ago, we signed the working with real estate agent disclosure, right? Because that's part, I even signed it too. I'm like, I don't know, better sign it than not sign it. I'd rather have more information than not enough if it goes down. Can everybody agree with that? Let's see. So let's take a quick look at our Q&A brochure. I love this. My favorite part is at the end. They put in pictures. That was my favorite part. I was so excited when they put in pictures. So this brochure, it's meant to be one of those multi-fold things, so it shows up in a nice brochure. But you're really starting on page 2, Q&A on working with real estate agents. This is to the buyers and or the sellers. So this is information that we can help provide them. Here it is again in big bold. Do not share confidential information or assume that the agent is acting on your best behalf until you have entered into a written agency agreement with the agent to represent you. Otherwise, the agent can share confidential information with others, and this could hurt your ability to negotiate the best deal for yourself. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be held against you. That's basically what we're saying there. The second panel, again, more information. Here's our important note about racial equality and fair housing. So the commission has put that in our Q&A brochure, who the protected classes are and our duties to comply with fair housing. For the consumer, it defines what agency means. It defines what an agency agreement is. Again, why are you guys out there recreating the wheel? The information you need is right here. It's right here. The commission provides it to you. Is there a standard length of time for an agency agreement? No, it's all negotiable. Is there a standard fee for real estate agents? No, it's all negotiable. And then it breaks it down into sections. Q&A for sellers. So if you're working with the seller, if you're meeting the seller for the first time, you can just specifically have this conversation with them. I want to sell my property. What do I need to know about working with agents? So it goes on to answer that, talking about the listing agreement, the listing agent. What are the listing agent's duties to the seller? So it spells out the things to promote your property, be loyal, follow your lawful instructions, reasonable skill, care, and diligence. Kind of sums up OCAR for us. What services might a listing agent provide? We can help you price your property, market your property. How is the listing firm compensated? Well, the seller gets to pay for representing the seller. You will pay the listing firm. If I list my property with a firm that also represents a buyer, what's going to happen? So it goes in to talk about dual agency relationships. Helps us explain that. And again, we'll see that in our agency agreements tomorrow. What's the risk of dual agency? I think that's a very fair question that buyers and sellers should be asking. And if they're not asking, then we need to answer that before they think to ask it. Understand the risks involved with dual agency. Can I sell my property without hiring an agent? Yes, you can go for sale by owner. You can go unrepresented. What happens when the listing agreement expires? And then similar exercise, Q&A for buyers. I want to work with an agent. What do I need to do? Here it spells out the buyer's or the buyer's agent's duty to the buyer. Back up on the first page, which would be flipped over if you were looking in the brochure. Must a buyer have a written agency agreement? Not at first. When we talk about working with buyers, we'll probably get there next weekend. When we talk about working with buyers, we're going to learn that we can work with a buyer under an oral agency agreement at first. Various services that your buyer's agent. How is a buyer's agent compensated? Here's dual agency again, as explained to the buyer. Can I buy without hiring an agent? Yes. Again, you guys, people buy and sell houses all day, every day without us. They don't need us. It's part of our job. And I think it's becoming more and more a part of our job to, you know, they have so much information at their fingertips. They can go to Zillow and Realtor.com and find out information. Zillow can't negotiate for the best of their behalf, right? Zillow can't help them get in the door in some cases. I heard something the other day. Y'all know there are real estate markets out there right now where the buyer can like swipe their credit card at a lockbox and get access to the property. They just got to put, I mean, that makes me a little, you know, when I first heard that, I about got a little livid. But yeah, I hope that doesn't fly, because that's one less thing they need us for, right? If they don't even need to get us to get in the front door, if they can just swipe a credit card to get the key. We're working harder. Chastity, I know that's like mind blowing, isn't it? But yeah. I think this came up because one of my teammates said he had a buyer call and he was trying to swipe their credit, figure out where to swipe their credit card on an e-box. And I was like, that's weird. And they were like, not in all markets. I was like, oh my gosh. Termination.
When I moved to North Carolina, sorry, I was renting a house, and that's I forget who it was, but we did a self tour, and that's how we did it.
You went in without the agent?
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, was it an occupied property?
No, it wasn't occupied. It was, yeah, it was vacant. But
I'm not going to say I understand it for vacant, but
yeah.
Did that feel weird being unsupervised?
I didn't know otherwise.
You didn't know any difference.
I didn't know otherwise. I just said, okay, hey, you
all
know.
right. Guys,
Yeah.
whenever you're in somebody's home, may it be with or without an agent, y'all, it is 2022. We need to conduct our lives as if we're on camera, because you know what? Especially when you're inside somebody else's home, there's a really good chance that you are. So make sure, and I hope some of these homes that allow this thing, vacant or not, have security systems, something. Termination of agency agreements. If I hire, what happens? Can I terminate? The answer is maybe. You guys, it's important that we remember the relationship is between the consumer, the client, and the firm. Can I, as an agent, fire my buyer? Not as the agent, because it's not my buyer. It's the firm's buyer. So if I'm having a problem with a buyer, I need to go to my BIC. Maybe my BIC will reassign them. You know, not everybody's personalities mesh well together. I know we all think that everybody loves me and everybody. No, you're going to come across people, not all personalities mesh well together. So before you start firing clients, you need to get with your BIC, because they're not yours to fire.
just a warning to everybody out there too, that's on this call.
Uh-oh.
You know, no kidding. I mean, be very careful. You were talking about like listening devices in people's homes. You know, people don't really pay attention to it. Don't talk about price and personal information in homes because people are listening.
And they shouldn't be. And that's
Yeah.
something we're going to discuss when we talk about working with sellers tomorrow. They're not supposed to have audio, but to your point, Donna, absolutely still warn your buyers because they may.
Yep. Yeah.
I tell my buyers, don't tell me much until we get, not even at the front porch, because you got Ring doorbells, right? That could be picking
Yeah.
up on the audio. They
Yeah.
shouldn't be, but can we trust everybody is honest and always does the right thing?
Nope.
No. So
Mm-mm.
yeah, we'll talk about that tomorrow. Thank you. The last part of the Q&A brochure, and this is my favorite. I can't tell you the glee I felt when we got these new brochures and they gave us pictures. This helps explain the relationship, not just to the consumer, but let's face it, to me and you as well, right? So you could have a scenario with buyer agency and seller agency. You see the buyer is one firm, that because broker A is red and broker B is blue, we know they're with different firms. This is a red firm, this is the blue firm, and then they're working with the seller. You see their different attire, so we know that they're two different people. This is buyer agency and seller agent. This is a co-broker transaction. Firm A is working with the buyer, firm B is working with the seller. And then we have a picture to help us understand dual agency. How many firms? One firm, and one firm is holding the hands of both buyer and seller. Dual agency can be one of two scenarios. It can be, I said firm, it can be one agent within the firm. It can be two agents within the same firm, both with red firm. You guys see what we're doing here? You see how these two are holding hands? Because they're with the same firm. So one agent holding both the hands of buyer or seller, or two agents within the same firm. And then look at what happens when we get into designated. Still the same firm, but now they're no longer holding hands because this agent has been designated to work exclusively with the buyer. This agent has been designated to work exclusively with the seller, and that's designated. Do we not love the pictures? I love the pictures. Again, it doesn't just help the consumer understand it, but let's face it, this is difficult for us to wrap our brains around sometimes too. I'm a big fan of pictures, and I was just thrilled when they released this. So we'll talk about dual agency. Like I said, we got a couple more sections. Most of tomorrow, we're going to talk about working with sellers. So when you guys come on the call tomorrow morning, have your listing agent hat on, ready to go. Another section is going to be specifically about working with buyers. And then another big section is going to be about working with both. May that be a dual agency or a designated dual agency. Any questions or comments about anything we've talked about today? How you guys feeling? 1 day down, 3 to go. How's that for you? So we get to do it again tomorrow. Hey there. We get to do it again tomorrow. Start at 9 o'clock again. I'm a start on time kind of gal. So once we've got through the first initial introductions, I think we can start right at 9 tomorrow. I'll probably log on about, 8:50, 8:55. So if you want to come on, and then you can run and get your coffee or breakfast, and we'll get started right at 9. Fair enough? All right. When we meet tomorrow, I'll have our YouTube channel. Everything we've said today has been recorded, so we can put the recording in our YouTube channel so you can refer back to it. Remember, there's some good quizzes in Learn, Test, Pass. If you're not in Learn, Test, Pass, please make that a priority tonight. I'd like all of you to be in tomorrow so you have access to it this week. Again, we're helping to help you learn and wrap your brain around this stuff, but you also got to take a test on it next week. The other thing I want to point out, we've been through most of Unit 8. I got some more to go back and get, but scattered throughout the unit, I think Unit 8 applies. Your book, your manual may have maybe not, unit 8. But scattered throughout, maybe, yeah, no. Unit 8 doesn't have it, never mind. Places in your book have self-assessments, and I was hoping there would be a self-assessment in unit 8, but I'm not seeing one offhand, not mean that yeah, there is self-check assessment. For example, on page 172. There's another one on 169. So there we go. As you're flipping through unit 8, make a note to pay attention to those self-check assessments. That's what they're there for, is to make sure you're understanding, you're doing a self-check and making sure you're understanding the terms and the stuff that we're talking about. Questions? Comments or concerns? Y'all remember to keep your NCAA celebrations low key tonight, because we got another big day tomorrow. So don't go out there and party too hard. Okay. All right. You guys have a good night, and we'll see you guys tomorrow morning.